At 3:47 this morning, 12 hours after the Senate voted to convict and strip the president from office, federal authorities stepped into the Oval Office. Four deputy U.S. Marshals, three Secret Service agents operating under Director Kimberly Cheatle's command, and one FBI supervisor overseeing the mission. They discovered the former president seated at the Resolute desk alone, reviewing paperwork. The lead marshal introduced himself and declared, "Sir, the Senate of the United States has convicted and stripped you of office. You are no longer the president. We are here to assist your exit from the White House. Will you come with us willingly?" According to sources who were present in the room, the former president replied, "This is unlawful. I am the president. I was chosen by the American people. You have no right to remove me," the marshal answered. "Sir, the Constitution grants the Senate authority to remove presidents through conviction. That authority was exercised yesterday. We are carrying out a lawful directive. Please come with us." At 4:03 a.m., 16 minutes after federal officers entered the Oval Office, the former president walked out of the White House for the final time. Subscribe to this channel immediately, because what I am about to walk you through is not a political victory or defeat. This is the moment the American constitutional system demonstrated it can enforce its most serious remedy, even when a president refuses to accept it. This is the Secret Service, as Director Cheatle pledged, facilitating the lawful transfer of authority. And this is democracy surviving its greatest test. Turn on notifications. Set them to all, because the constitutional crisis that has consumed the country for weeks concluded at 4:03 a.m. when the former president exited the White House. The question now is what kind of nation emerges from this crisis, and whether the institutions that carried out removal can maintain public confidence. Here is what unfolded during the 12 hours between the Senate conviction and the physical removal, because the timeline reveals how the standoff concluded. At 6:23 p.m. yesterday, U.S. Marshals arrived at the White House Northwest Gate and were blocked by Secret Service agents loyal to the former president. That standoff continued through the night. At 8:47 p.m., Secret Service Director Cheatle arrived at the White House in person. She entered through a secure passage and met with agents on the Presidential Protection Detail. According to sources, she told agents directly, "The Senate has removed him. He is no longer the president. Our oath belongs to the Constitution, not to any individual. We will not obstruct the lawful execution of a Senate conviction. Any agent who interferes with federal law enforcement from carrying out lawful orders will be dismissed and potentially prosecuted." At 9:34 p.m., three agents assigned to the detail left the White House and joined the protection team for the incoming president. At 10:15 p.m., two more agents departed. By midnight, only 7 Secret Service agents remained with the former president, and those 7 were wavering. At 1:47 a.m., Director Cheatle met with the remaining agents and issued a direct order: stand down, permit the marshals to enter, support departure, or resign at once and face disciplinary consequences. At 2:34 a.m., the last of the holdout agents stood down. The path was open for federal law enforcement to proceed. At 3 a.m., the U.S. Marshal Service, coordinating with Secret Service and FBI, completed the plan. 4 marshals would enter the Oval Office. 3 Secret Service agents would accompany them to demonstrate that the Secret Service backed the operation. FBI would secure the perimeter. The objective was peaceful departure, but the marshals were authorized to apply necessary force if the former president physically resisted. At 3:47 a.m., they entered. Hit that like button right now if you understand what just happened. Federal law enforcement removed a former president from the White House 12 hours after the Senate convicted him because he declined to leave voluntarily. The algorithm decides what breaks through. You decide whether this analysis reaches people who need to see it, because what I am showing you is the constitutional system enforcing removal even when the removed president resisted with every tool available. At 3:47 a.m., the confrontation in the Oval Office lasted 16 minutes. The former president was not alone when agents arrived. 2 personal aides were present, 1 private attorney and 1 remaining political advisor. All were instructed to leave the room. They complied. The former president was then presented with the choice: depart voluntarily or be escorted. According to sources, he declared, "I will not leave willingly. If you remove me, you are violating the Constitution and committing an illegal act. I will challenge this in court. I will bring this to the American people, but I will not walk out of this office of my own accord." The lead marshal responded, "Sir, we understand your position, but the law is clear. The Senate convicted. You are removed. We are required to execute that removal. We prefer this to be peaceful. Will you walk with us, or do we need to physically escort you?" The former president rose. He gathered some personal belongings from the desk, papers, a phone, a photograph, and he stated, "You are making a historic mistake. The American people will not forget this. I am being removed unlawfully, but I will not give you the satisfaction of dragging me out. I will walk, but under protest, and this is not finished." At 4:03 a.m., the former president walked out of the Oval Office, flanked by U.S. Marshals. Secret Service agents who had stood down watched in silence. He moved down the hallway through the West Wing and out to the South Lawn. A government vehicle was waiting, not Marine One, not a presidential motorcade, a standard black SUV. The former president climbed into the back seat. The vehicle departed the White House grounds, and for the first time since the crisis began, the White House was no longer occupied by someone the Senate had removed from office. Drop a comment right now. Tell me if you believe this removal was constitutional, or if the former president was right that it was unlawful. I am reading every response because this question will be debated for generations. At 4:15 a.m., the incoming president entered the White House for the first time as president, not as acting president, not as vice president, as president confirmed by Senate conviction and removal of the predecessor. The new president walked into the Oval Office, took a seat at the resolute desk, and issued the first executive order. Quote, "All federal agencies are directed to resume standard operations under the lawful chain of command. The constitutional crisis is over. The government will function." That order was sent to every cabinet department, every federal agency, every military command. The message, there is one president. The crisis has ended. Move forward. At 6:08 a.m., the new president held the first morning national security briefing in the Oval Office. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs delivered the overnight threat assessment. The director of national intelligence briefed on global developments. The secretary of defense reviewed military posture. It was a routine presidential briefing, the kind that occurs every morning, except this was the first one conducted by the new president in the White House after the former president was physically removed hours earlier. Subscribe to this channel right now if you have not already, because what I am about to show you is how the nation and the world are responding to the removal and what this means for American democracy going forward. At 7 a.m., the major networks broke into regular programming to announce that the former president had been removed from the White House overnight. Video captured the government vehicle leaving the grounds at 4:03 a.m., images of the new president arriving at 4:15 a.m., and statements from the White House confirming that the constitutional crisis had concluded. The coverage was global. Every major international news organization led with the story that a U.S. president convicted by the Senate had been physically removed from office after refusing to depart. At 8 a.m., Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer held a press conference. Quote, "Last night, the constitutional system functioned. The Senate exercised its power to convict and remove. The former president declined to accept that verdict, but the rule of law prevailed. Federal law enforcement led by courageous Secret Service agents who honored their oath to the Constitution carried out the removal. This is not a triumph for any party. This is a triumph for the Constitution." Schumer was asked whether the removal was handled appropriately. He stated, "No one wanted it to reach physical removal, but when a president defies the Senate's constitutional authority, enforcement becomes necessary. That enforcement occurred peacefully and lawfully." At 8:30 a.m., Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, who voted to convict, also issued a statement. Quote, "The Senate's conviction was grounded in clear evidence that the president defied the Supreme Court. 68 senators, including 17 Republicans, determined that removal was necessary. When the former president declined to accept that judgment, enforcement became unavoidable. I supported conviction. I support the enforcement of that conviction. The Senate's power to remove presidents must be meaningful. Last night proved it is." At 9 a.m., Chief Justice John Roberts released a brief statement through the Supreme Court. Quote, "The The Senate exercised its constitutional authority to try and convict a president. That process was conducted in accordance with constitutional requirements. The enforcement of the Senate's verdict upholds the separation of powers and the rule of law. Roberts did not elaborate, but his statement endorsed the legitimacy of both the conviction and the removal. At 10 a.m., the former president issued a statement through his legal team. Quote, "I was unlawfully removed from the White House by federal agents acting under unconstitutional directives. The Senate conviction was based on a fraudulent impeachment. I remain the rightful president. I will pursue all legal remedies, and I will continue fighting for the American people who elected me." That statement suggests the former president will challenge the conviction in court and will not concede that he has been removed. At 11 a.m., the new president addressed the nation from the Oval Office. Quote, "My fellow Americans, the constitutional crisis that has gripped our nation is over. The Senate exercised its authority. I have assumed office. The former president has departed the White House. I know many of you supported him. I know many of you have questions about what occurred, but I ask you to accept what the Constitution requires. The Senate convicted. That conviction removed him from office. The government must now function. I am dedicated to healing the divisions in this country and restoring faith in our institutions. We will move forward together." The address was brief, 10 minutes, and centered on unity and moving past the crisis. Here is what we are watching for over the coming weeks and months. 6 indicators that will tell us how the country recovers from this crisis. Indicator 1. Does the former president mount a serious legal challenge to the conviction? If he files lawsuits arguing the Senate lacked authority to remove him, courts will need to address whether Senate convictions are reviewable. Indicator 2. Do Republican voters accept the conviction or view it as illegitimate? If polling shows large majorities of Republicans believe the former president was removed unlawfully, it signals deep and lasting division. Indicator 3. Does the new president govern effectively and build public support? If the new administration demonstrates competence and wins over skeptics, it validates the removal. If not, it reinforces claims that the crisis was about politics, not the Constitution. Indicator 4. Do any federal employees or military personnel refuse to recognize the new president? If resistance persists inside government, it signals the crisis has not fully concluded. Indicator 5. Does Congress pass legislation to clarify impeachment and removal procedures? If lawmakers determine the process exposed gaps in constitutional mechanisms, they may move to address them. Indicator 6. Do historians and constitutional scholars reach consensus on whether the removal was appropriate? If academic and legal opinion converges on legitimacy, it helps establish precedent. If opinion stays divided, the controversy continues. Here are the 3 long-term scenarios. Scenario 1. The country accepts the removal and moves on. The new president governs successfully. The former president's legal challenges fail. Public opinion shifts toward viewing the crisis as the system working. Within a year, it is regarded as a historic but resolved constitutional moment. This is the healing scenario. Scenario 2. The country remains deeply fractured. Half view the removal as legitimate. Half view it as a coup. The former president becomes a symbol of resistance. The new president struggles with credibility. Trust in institutions stays low. This is the ongoing division scenario. Scenario 3. The crisis has broken something fundamental. Faith in the Senate's impeachment power is weakened. Future presidents believe they can defy Supreme Court rulings without consequence if they are willing to resist removal. The constitutional system is permanently damaged. This is the collapse scenario. Subscribe right now, like this video, comment with your prediction. Which scenario describes America going forward? I am tracking all 3, and as the months unfold, you will see the analysis here. Let me show you the historical significance. In 234 years of American history, the Senate had never convicted and removed a president. Andrew Johnson was acquitted by 1 vote. Bill Clinton was acquitted easily. Donald Trump was acquitted twice. But today that changed. The Senate convicted 68 to 32. 17 Republicans joined all Democrats, and when the former president declined to leave, federal law enforcement removed him. That has never happened before. The impeachment power existed in theory for over 2 centuries. Last night it was enforced in practice. This matters because it establishes that Senate conviction is not symbolic. It is enforceable. A president who is convicted and removed cannot simply refuse to depart. The Secret Service, as Director Cheatle pledged, protects the office, not the person. The U.S. Marshals execute lawful orders, including the removal of former presidents who occupy the White House unlawfully, and the constitutional system, when pushed to its absolute boundary, held. What I know for certain right now, at 3:47 a.m., federal agents entered the Oval Office. At 4:03 a.m., the former president left the White House. At 4:15 a.m., the new president entered. At 6:08 a.m., the first national security briefing occurred. The constitutional crisis that began when the cabinet invoked the 25th Amendment, that escalated through Supreme Court defiance and emergency powers and impeachment and conviction, has concluded with the physical removal of a former president who refused to accept that he was removed. The system worked. It took weeks. It required the House to impeach with bipartisan backing. It required the Senate to convict with 17 Republicans breaking party loyalty. It required the Secret Service to choose the Constitution over an individual. It required federal law enforcement to physically remove someone from the White House. But it worked. The coming months will reveal whether this crisis strengthened or weakened American democracy. Did we prove that the constitutional system can restrain even the most defiant president? Or did we demonstrate that it requires extraordinary measures and dangerously close calls to enforce basic constitutional principles? The answer depends on whether this becomes the precedent that future presidents fear or the example that future presidents believe they can replicate if they are willing to go far enough. What is certain is that the American presidency will never be the same. Every president going forward will know that Senate conviction is real, that removal can be enforced, and that defying it carries consequences.